Hello everyone, and welcome back to another R tutorial video. And in this video, we're going to begin to do a little bit more complex construction with tmap, specifically trying to create a multi-layer map. So you could imagine a scenario where you wanted to have the state boundaries and the highways on the same map, right? That's a pretty common thing that you may want to do. And you can certainly accomplish that in tmap fairly easily. And we're going to go through the steps of how you would do that. So the first thing I did is I brought down the New Haven dataset, which is, again, this is the database that we've been working with. It has all of the, so let me clear this just to prove to you that we're not calling in something from before. So this has all the data sets that we want in it, and we run this. Specifically, we're going to be talking in this video about blocks and tracks because these are two spatial polygon frames. And I just want to show you sort of in the construction the order of things, why it matters, and what happens when you move things around. And then in the next video, we'll get into a little more complex construction with different geometries. But for now, we'll just reproject roads because, again, for some reason that data set doesn't have a projection. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new variable called map multi, and this is going to have multiple layers. And the first thing we need to do, as always, is start with our tm underscore shape. In the tm underscore shape, we're going to pass in the shape parameter, and we're going to start with blocks. And I want to start with blocks first because I want to recreate the map we made in our first polygon video. We're going to use tm fill. So if we run this, as expected, we shouldn't get any errors. And then we'll just quickly plot it just to prove that it works. Help if I could spell multi, not mullet. Okay. We will run that. You'll see that we get exactly what we would expect, right? The polygons without any borders filled in with the default light gray color. Okay, so that's not particularly new, right? So let's go ahead and let's add some more stuff to this. And this is where I think it's important to sort of go back to the ideas of ggplot and then point out how tm functions differently. All right, so if you remember back to the ggplot videos that we've done, when you want to add multiple plots or multiple graphics to a single plot, right, you had the data stored either in the ggplot call or you could pass the data directly into the geom calls. But in this case, right, we can't do that. Right, tm isn't built that way. The only thing that takes in data for the most part is this tm shape function. So if we wanted to add an additional geometry, right, we could certainly do tm underscore borders, right? And if we run this, we're not going to get any crashes. And if we run this again, so we actually execute it, you'll see that we've done exactly what we thought we would, right? We have the tm fill based on blocks, and then we have tm borders. And tm borders is also grabbing the data from blocks. So in this respect, it works very similarly to the ggplot, where you have one function handling the data, and then a bunch of subsequent functions adding how that data gets placed onto the map. But what if we wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, what if we wanted to have multiple layers, right? What if we wanted to have another set of polygons? Say, for example, we wanted the background here to be from blocks, but we want the borders to be from tracks. Well, to do that, we would have to add in a second tm shape call. And I think this is kind of where things get a little bit confusing, in my opinion, because you have to keep track of the order here. Right, so if we do shape equals tracks, so this is going to pull in the census tracks for New Haven, and this is going to pull in the census blocks from New Haven. So if we run this, we don't get any errors. If we run that, apparently census tracks also does not have a projection. We can fix that really quickly by tracks at proj4string equals tracks at sorry, not tracks, blocks. At publish for string. Again, I would not recommend normally doing it that way, but because there's no defined projection, we're just going to give it the one that we know is true. Anyway, so if we run map multi and then we run that and we scroll down here, you'll see that now we have the gray background coming from blocks, right? Because this is what tm fill was. And then we have the boundaries, right, coming from tm borders. But tm borders in this case is drawing from the tracks here. So the point that I want to make here is that the way this works is whenever you make a geometry call, whether it's fill, borders, polygon, dots, lines, raster, whatever, right? Those sort of geometry calls that we've talked about in the previous videos. What they do is it goes back through everything that's been added to tmap so far until it hits the most recent call of tm shape. So in this case, it goes back and calls and hits blocks and says, okay, we're going to do fill based on blocks. In this case, it goes back and it says, okay, we're going to do shape based on borders based on tracks. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. What that means is that order matters a lot. For example, if we were to copy this over and we were to switch and put the tm borders back here and do it this way, I'm going to tell you right now this is going to crash when we go to map it. And you'll see that it says error, no layer elements defined after tm shape. And what it's complaining about is that we have a tm shape call here, and we have two geometry calls based on this. But then we have this other tm shape, and we just kind of left this one to hang, right? There's nothing after it. And tmap doesn't like that when you actually go to map it. It's fine when you're setting up the variable, but when you actually go to execute and make the plot, it doesn't know what to do with this. And it's saying, hey, you told me that I was going to be doing something with this, but you never told me what to do. Right? So order is important. And we would have the same error happen if we were to do this. And I think this is a little bit more reasonable. Right? Say you set up your... Say you wanted to set it up this way. Load a data set, and then call to geometries. Right? Again, we don't get an error when we set up the variable, but when we go to execute it, we again get that no layer elements defined. And we're getting that because this TM right here, or this TM shape right here, has no geometry calls after it, right? All of the geometry calls, right, TM fill and TM borders, right, they're both going backwards through the list until they hit the first TM shape before them, right, the most recent TM shape, which in this case is tracks. So none of these are going to reference blocks. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we could do, if we wanted this to actually run, we could do tm underscore borders, borders. So now this isn't going to crash there, and it's not going to crash here either, but you'll see that what we've done is we don't even see this, right? We don't see this border call. And that's because order matters, right? Just like the geometry calls go back to the most recent TM shape, well, if you have a geometry call that overlaps another geometry call, all right, like in this case, pulling TM fill from tracks is going to completely overwrite the TM borders from the blocks. So even though this is technically correct in that it's going to execute, you'll never see it because it's being completely overwritten by this here. So if we remove TM fill, this is going to get a little trippy here. It's a little hard to see. Let's cheat a little bit. And I'm going to do a little bit of spicing up. Right. You'll see now that we have the blocks in red and the tracks in black. So you can see that in this case, right, both of them are borders, so they both show through. But if we put the fill on the second one, we're completely covering up the first. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you see why order matters. Hopefully you see why you can't have all of your data sets in all your TM shapes first and then your geometry second, because you'll only be calling on the last TM shape and you're actually getting error on execution. Hopefully that made sense. I know there's a lot. I strongly encourage you to pause the video, go back, rewatch the parts you're confused about, and as always, please reach out. Thank you.